and the host who invited both of you may approach you and say, "Give your place to this man," and then you would proceed with embarrassment to take the lowest place. Rather, when you are invited, go and take the lowest place, so that when the host comes to you, he may say, "My friend, move up to a higher position." Then you will enjoy the esteem of your companions at the table. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Then he said to the host who invited him, "When you hold a lunch or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your wealthy neighbors, in case they may invite you back and you have repayment. Rather, when you hold a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Blessed indeed will you be because of their inability to repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." The Gospel of the Lord. May our sins be wiped away.
Not all that long ago, I was at the home of some friends having dinner, and following the meal, we headed into the living room to watch a movie. We all sat down on various chairs and couches, started the movie, and before long I was engrossed in the plot. About 10 or 15 minutes into the movie, something unexpected happened. The family dog made his way into the room. He walked right over to me, and he just stared at me to make it clear that he was sulking. And I was really, really confused by his behavior. And the whole family started laughing hysterically, and they explained that the seat that I had selected was always where the dog sat whenever the family was together in that room. Now, for the briefest of seconds, I felt bad and contemplated moving. But considering that there weren't any other seats in the room, I wasn't about to give up my seat for the dog. Eventually, he went away for about 5 minutes, after which he returned to make it clear to me that he wasn't thrilled that I was sitting in his chair. Him and I kind of had a stare down back and forth for a while. And in response to his insistence and the fact that he wouldn't stop and just let it be, the family's daughter got up and welcomed the dog to sit with her in her chair, which looked like it couldn't have been comfortable at all. And it clearly wasn't, because shortly after this, she ended up on the floor while the dog relaxed contentedly on the chair. Now, perhaps the reason why the dog was so insistent and just wouldn't let the whole thing go when I was in his seat is because he thought to himself that as a priest, I should know better than to have taken this seat of honor in light of Jesus' teaching. Because Jesus clearly explained that when you go to a banquet, you don't recline at the place of honor, because one more distinguished than you may have been invited, and in that case, you'll be embarrassed when you're asked to give your seat over and proceed to the lower place. Now, I'll tell you that during this whole showdown with the dog, I was in fact offered a different seat. Although it wasn't because I wanted to give the dog a higher place, rather they just didn't want him bothering me. In the end, however, it was fascinating watching the daughter give the dog her place as she took the floor. I say this because in Jesus' parable, he explains what might happen if someone greater than you shows up, and out of humility, you have to take the lower spot. In her case, however, I will say that she showed an even deeper and greater degree of humility, taking the lower place, not because it was what custom or protocol would have called for, but she chose out of humility and love to give her higher place to the one who in the grand scheme of things was in fact lower than her. And in doing so, she was following the footsteps of Jesus, who himself did the same exact thing out of love in the incarnation. In fact, what Jesus did was infinitely more profound, because he lowered himself not just to give us a seat as he took the floor, but he entered into reality, truly becoming one of us, thus making himself capable of being laid on the floor of a tomb, so that doing so he could one day give us a higher seat in heaven. His humility was greater and more infinite, because the difference between perfect God and sinful humanity is immeasurably beyond the difference between a human and a dog. and he entered into our condition. But why? Why did he do this? It's for one reason. Because of his love for you. And when I said that there was only one reason, I want to take this one step further and say that this love was in fact twofold. Of course he did this because of his love for us. That was the object of his love and the goal of the action of his love. But the thing that made it possible was the love that he knew was his from the Father. Right? So love was the motivation, but it was also the cause. He did it because he knew that he himself was loved. If we seek to live with humility, we need to acknowledge both of these two aspects as well. To grasp, to understand, and to experience and believe in God's love. And then from this, knowing that we're treasured despite of and right smack dab in the middle of our weaknesses, despite the fact that we might sometimes feel unlovable or even undeserving of love at times, we need to be willing to pour forth this same love to those who we might feel are undeserving of our love. When we think about the word humility, my guess is that a lot of people often link it up with the idea of having a modest or a low view of oneself. But in reality, the definition is quite different from what we usually think. See, the true definition of humility as a virtue is simply seeing things as God sees them. And the fact of the matter is, God sees every single person as being worthy and deserving of love. And not only deserving of his love, but deserving of our love as well. True humility on our part allows us to realize that we need to acknowledge the fact that those whom we struggle with, those whom we don't see eye to eye with, those who we don't have a natural connection with, as well as those who cause us pain, or those that we more or less consider to be like a dog, true humility allows us to see that we have to treat them with love. That we are called to humbly lower ourselves in service, following the example of Jesus. Now, I know this isn't an easy ask. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to look at someone who has caused us pain and to turn around and to forgive them and strive to treat them with love. Striving to see them with humility, to see them as God sees them. It isn't easy to repeat with Jesus, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Yet here's what I'll ask. How often do we honestly even try to pray this prayer? How often do we actually try to pray with those who have hurt us, "Father, forgive them, they know not what they do"? I'll admit that it's very infrequent that I end up saying, you know what, okay, from their perspective, yeah, I guess they know not what they do. Right? No, they know exactly what they do, and they hurt me, so on and so forth. That doesn't get us anywhere. Jesus saw the reality behind the pain, right, that was caused to him. He didn't experience pain and then stop there. He took into account the big picture and realized that the people who were causing such deep distress for him didn't fully understand what they were doing. I will propose right now that in our own lives, if we humbly strive to comprehend and discern why those who hurt us have done so, we'll most likely come to see that there are multiple various factors in play in their lives that have nothing, absolutely nothing to do with maliciousness. Let us make the decision to pray this prayer daily, Jesus' prayer. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." The final thing I'll mention is that the beginning of humility, again, is not simply to love, but the beginning of it is to realize that we are loved. Oftentimes, due to the pain that we feel, we can begin to believe the lie that we are unlovable. But this is simply not true. We need to wholly and completely reject and renounce this lie. I truly believe that before we can ever fully love those around us who are truly in need of our love, before we can give them this all that they need, we need to believe that we ourselves are loved by God. Again, humility is seeing things as God sees them. And this means that humility isn't comprised in self-deprecating or talking ourselves down, simply because, well, that would seem to be the opposite of pride. That's not what humility is. Humility is boldly proclaiming, I am loved by God. That is how he sees me. He sees me as someone that is worthy and deserving of love simply because he says so, because he declares it and he makes it to be. But the next step with this is then realizing that this love is a gift and that I am called to go out on mission because that's the reason why God has created me out of love. Humility means realizing that I'm loved not simply so that I can be happy and keep it for myself, but I'm loved in such a way that I'm capable of going out and making a difference so others can know this love as well through me. So where does this leave us? I hope it leaves us with a great deal of hope. We need to not worry about giving up higher places or honors or distinctions. Because if we know and believe that we are loved as we are, then we will realize that honors and high places, in fact, don't add to who we are. You, right here and right now, are perfectly loved, regardless of what you have or don't have, regardless of your position in an objective or subjective way, regardless of what you may have done or not have done. Nothing can change this. So be grateful for God's gift of love. Claim and accept this love wholeheartedly. Reject any lies to the contrary. And get out there to love everyone that God puts in your midst, even the dog. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth,